Yep.
In this episode, we speak with Laura Compean about the common struggle educators face when designing and facilitating a math support class to help students who have traditionally struggled in mathematics. How can we build a welcoming classroom culture that might also help to heal bruised relationships with mathematics while ensuring that students are engaging in the learning necessary for them to be successful in their mainstream math class?
We will talk about this pebble in Laura's shoe through this Math Mentoring Moment episode, where we talk with a member of the Math Mo-Maker community, a person just like you, who is working through problems of practice. And together, we brainstorm possible next steps and strategies to overcome them.
All right, let's do this. Welcome to the Making Math Moments That Matter podcast. I'm Kyle Pierce.
And I'm John Orr. We are two math teachers from MakeMathMoments.com who together,
with you, the community of math moment makers worldwide who want to build and deliver problem-based math lessons that spark curiosity,
fuel sense making,
and ignite your teacher moves. Welcome, everyone, to another Math Mentoring Moment episode where, just like John said, we get to hang out and chat with a math moment maker just like you about that pebble or pebbles or boulder that might be kicking around in your shoe. John, today it was great getting to chat with someone who, first of all, is wearing a ton of hats, as you'll find out, right? And that's a struggle in and of itself, but is also entrusted to deliver a math support class. They call it a math lab class in this school. And, we get to chat about some of the challenges in doing so because, you definitely have some competing priorities when you're in that particular scenario. What was your take from the conversation here before we dive in?
Yeah, before we dive in, I was impressed with the name of the class to start with, Math Lab class. Like, I think that's a pretty nifty way to call like your intermediate, your support class, or hey, I'm in this class because I've been pulled aside. I needed help more than these other kids, and so what a great way to name that class. I think Math Lab makes a lot of sense. I'm excited to take a math lab. That sounds kind of cool. But it was great to chat with Laura because she's on this great quest. She's on this quest that a lot of us are on about changing mindsets in mathematics. And what a great way to start with supporting those students in her class and trying to get students who've probably routinely been told that they're bad at math and come into class not liking math. And for her to kind of try to change things around, how to steer the ship in a different direction by providing activities. Great on her. In this episode, you're going to hear us kind of chat about how we can steer what she was doing to be a little bit more purposeful to the students so that they can walk out of there going, like, I know exactly what this relates to in my Algebra 1 class. So stick around and you're going to hear that conversation. Let's go to it.
All right, here we go.
Hey there, Laura. Thanks for joining us on the Making Math Moments That Matter podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
We are good. And as I said, thanks.
But great.
Right. We're just coming off the weekend of the virtual summit at the time of this recording. So Kyle was just saying how old he feels and coming off basically staying at his computer for 12 hours, 2 days in a row. Yeah. And feels like he's hit a brick wall. So he's doing well. He's doing well, but we are happy to be here with Laura. Laura, fill us in a few details. Where are you coming from? What's your teaching role and what's going on lately?
Great. Thank you. My name is Laura Compean. I am from Southern California, a little city called San Clemente, California. I have been teaching at San Clemente High School for probably 18 years now. I actually graduated from San Clemente High School, so I didn't go very far.
There you go.
I am currently a calculus and math lab teacher. I'm the department chair, and I'm also an instructional coach. So I have many different hats going on.
I was just going to say, I'm like, that is quite the massive bunch of roles that you're taking on. I can only imagine that there's probably, later on, we're going to talk about pebbles in our shoes. And I think the more roles you take on, the more pebbles or boulders that you invite into your shoe. So
Totally.
I'm sure we'll have a lot to chat about here today. That's awesome. Laura, having like teaching at the school that you went to, I want to know, what is that like? Like, do you feel like a sense of like additional pride? Like, I think teachers all feel very proud of the school they teach at, and they really want students to feel invited into the community. Like, do you feel like you have like an added sense of that sort of like passion for the school, or are you like I'm living in the same neighborhood? Like, what's going on in your head with that? I'm always curious.
It's so amazing that I've been here so long that when I first started, I was teaching students that I was babysitting back 5 years prior to, and then now it's like, okay, now I have students of my own classmates that I graduated with, their kids are coming through. So it's funny having the different role. Like, as I get older, there's more and more community that's coming back through. And my nephew is actually in my class now, so it's a lot of fun. I definitely, my prom date is a history teacher here as well.
Wow. That is hilarious.
So we all come back. It's a great place to live.
So you both should chaperone the prom and, maybe like put on a little skit or something for the new prom king and queen. There you go.
Yeah. Awesome stuff. Laura, if you've listened to the podcast before, this question is coming. We ask all of our guests this question. We are anxiously awaiting what your math moment is. So when we say math class, this image pops into our minds. It's always, these things kind of stay with you. Fill us in on some details there. When we say math class, what pops in your mind? What has stuck with you all these years? It's
so funny that you asked. I've been thinking about this question for the 8 months that I've been listening to your podcast. And it definitely goes back to, I was in the movie theater after I graduated high school, and my calculus teacher comes in. And he said, and I was really happy that I actually passed the AP calculus class with a 4, the AP calculus test with a 4. And he's like, Laura, I was so disappointed with your score. And it hit me like, oh, I thought I would make you proud. It turns out I was mimicking the whole entire time. And I fooled him to think that I was a lot smarter than I really was. And it took me until I got to like this past year that I was like, wow, I wasn't really understanding the material. I was just really good at practicing and memorizing everything, that it finally clicked that like, oh, I really did fool him. He thought I was smarter than I really was. I mean, I worked hard. And don't get me wrong, I worked really hard on the problems. However, I don't know why it like slapped me in the face when he said that to me. And I now realize like, oh, wow, I was mimicking the whole time.
That is, and I'm guessing that you've heard us talk about that. We've had similar experiences ourselves. Myself in my later years in university, sort of coming to realize that, oh my gosh, I don't really know what I'm doing. And only once I started teaching, I sort of went, oh, this is like, there's something wrong about this, and it's really set us on a little bit of a different path. So I'm wondering, like, how does that moment, impact your teaching practice now? Like, is it something that you put straight into practice right out of the gate, or was it something that like you only sort of really thought about later into your career? I know for me, it was much later when I started to realize like what was happening, like why some of my students were struggling and why other students who were seemingly getting good marks, on a report card, but yet they still didn't feel confident. Like that, I could never understand that. I'm like, you have an 85. How is it possible that you don't feel confident? Mm-hmm. And it all makes sense to me now. Like, how do you think that's impacted or influenced how you are as a teacher now?
100%. And like I said, this has been very new to me to be able to see that difference of how many kids truly are just memorizing the types of problems and how many of them are actually understanding it behind it. I am excited. I remember a few years, or for many years in the past, I would always say, oh, don't worry, this one's not on the test, or, oh, don't worry, this one will look exactly the same on the test.
Yeah. And hint, there's going to be something like this on the test. Like I did that all the time.
How many times have I said that? Absolutely. So now I'm like, okay, guys, I want you to look at the big, broad aspect of it. Do you understand? Can you explain to me, what's going on here? And having the kids turn and talk to each other is so much more valuable of what I can hear them saying, if they really understand it or not, or are they just like, oh, that's what the teacher said, but they don't know the whys behind it. So it has full, and with AP Calculus, I think a lot of it is conceptual, that they need to know that. And that's where the class gets so hard, that they can't just memorize everything.
Right.
So it's been a huge shift in my own teaching. And like I said, I've been here for 20 years and I'm like, wow, I've definitely messed up. Not messed up, just had a different approach.
Better now, the more you know,
sure.
right?
Laura, can you share us a success story from this pivot that you've just realized, you said in the last year, to kind of realize that you've changed your teaching style to go away from this. Give us a snapshot. Like what would you say is a kind of a big win or a success story from this change?
I remember it was before the AP test, so probably March or April, I started using a lot of the mathematic or calcmetic material for the volume and area type of problems for that unit. And I started giving them the experience first, like, here's a pair. Can you find the volume of that pair? Or, it's a lot more hands-on. And I put them in groups of 3. They were working together, trying to experience. And the majority, I would say 85% of them loved that method because they could actually understand what was going on. It wasn't just me telling them the formula. They could really discover it on their own. But I remember the smartest kid in the class, he would come in, he's like, why are you doing this? You need to just tell me what's going on. And I'm like, no, you can do it. I believe it. And so finally at the end of the year, he's like, that was really the hardest part of the whole entire year. However, I will always remember that volume and area type of formulas. And I was like, yes.
I love it.
So it's funny how the smartest kids, they love just being told how to do the math because they've never been asked to think. And it's super cool to actually get them to think about it.
I love it. And I've had many experiences like that. And oftentimes it's like pushback initially from some of your quote unquote top students, right? The students that are, and you would, I wanted to comment on this earlier as well. You had mentioned like that you were kind of a memorizer or a mimicker, but you still worked really hard. And I will give them that. Like you can't just mimic your way through without working hard. Like it's hard work to do that, to put the reps in. So, but the difference though, is it's almost like you almost don't have to be thinking about it. Like you just keep doing it over and over again. And eventually it's like muscle memory, right? When you see that sort of thing. It's different thinking. It's not like this kind of problem solving thinking. It's kind of like a puzzly thinking. And what I mean by that, I feel like when I have my senior students who are, have traditionally been mimickers, it's you can mimic to a certain point, but then that the students have to be able to apply that. And you may show them along the way how to do a lot of those things because we were teaching mimicking. But then like there was a point where those, a good group of those students had to do some thinking there to connect some dots because we were like, oh yeah, like I'm going to give them this question and see if they can, like, it's a different thinking because we still front loaded everything. And then we asked them to think about how to take what we front loaded and then fit it into this mold, which is a different style of thinking than I think us going like, we don't know what we're doing here, or we're not going to tell you exactly what to do. What do you think? Like, what's a first step here to kind of like in this, what do we have on our tool belt from prior knowledge to use in this new situation? Like, I think that's a different style of problem solving. Yeah. It's almost like you're, when you're mimicking, you are relying a lot on that quick thinking brain. And then eventually, like when you change something, it's sort of like you go, whoa, and you have to like knock them out of that for a minute. And then they go, okay, now I've got to think about this a little bit, which students typically, like humans in general, are not huge fans of, right? Is like having to think and work hard. But ultimately at the end of the day, it's like, I used to, in my mind, picture like a good math student was someone who put in those reps, right? And I think you still need reps, like you still need to practice and you need to work hard. But it's just like how we get to that place. I want to make sure that students aren't just blindly following along, but I do want them to get the reps so that, hey, some of this stuff is going to almost be like second nature, right? Where they see a problem, they're like, oh, I know what to do here. I don't need to think about this one. And now I can think about something more complex, but not because they blindly got their way there. So really, really interesting discussion here. But I'm wondering, I want to shift now to what's on your mind lately. We had already talked about you're wearing a lot of hats. So I'm sure we could probably spend a whole week talking about the different like pebbles that appear in these different scenarios. But what's the one that's sort of keeping you up at night right now? The one that's, on your mind and that maybe we can kick around here today and see if we can't wiggle it out there.
Great. Thank you. So I have this math lab class, which is the current ninth graders who did not do well in Math 8. So we pulled them in and they have 2 math classes now. There's an Algebra 1 that every student needs to pass to get out of high school. And then they're also in Math Lab. In the past, we've given it to new teachers where here, do what you can,
right.
So it's been a really hard class for not only behavior wise, but getting the kids to do math. And they've always been like a co-current class where it's like, okay, in Algebra 1, they're doing this. So in Math Lab, they're going to be just hammering in more. And so it's been really hard on the kids because if they already don't like math and now they're doing 2, math classes essentially in one day is a lot. So I have been working in the past summer trying to shift it and make it into more of a confidence booster class that they can enjoy math, that we're doing a lot more games like mathematical thinking games that we're trying to build their foundational skills so they can be more successful in their Algebra 1 class. However, I'm having a hard time getting them motivated, getting them thinking, trying to get them to even start a problem. And that's where my pebble is. I don't know how to motivate the students.
The age-old question.
Yeah.
Laura, paint us a little bit of a picture of the class. So you've kind of said that you're trying different games, you're bringing different elements in. You want it to be a kind of a motivational kind of class, but also kind of a confidence builder class. Like I think that's great. I think that's a great kind of pivot to probably just saying like, hey, you're doing, solving 2-step equations in Algebra 1, and we're just going to do more of that and like longer and more repetitions, right? So I can see why you might want to pivot, and I think that's a great opportunity to change some mindsets with these students and paint us more of a picture of what, say, right now a typical lesson looks like for you.
Okay. We have been doing a lot of would you rathers, which one doesn't belong. We've, something at the beginning of the lesson to, if it's a journal, we've done a lot of Joe Bowlers with the growth mindset, trying to get them writing and speaking and talking mathematically without them knowing it. We've done a lot of your lessons with the notice and wonder first, and then sending them to the whiteboards to get them thinking about how to solve the problem. That has been great. We've tried spicy, medium, and mild type of problems.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
And just giving them the choice on which questions to go and choose. And it's funny because I think everyone would want to do a mild, and they sometimes jump straight to the medium, and they're like, "Look, we can do it." I'm like, "Well, now it's time for you to try the spice."
Yeah.
We're constantly having them up at the whiteboards and working in groups of 3. But I know that whole low floor, high ceiling is super, super important, more so than I've ever realized, because if they feel intimidated by any means, they just shut down. Right. And so I don't know how to get the right entry point for them to, start at the beginning, like once we introduce the problem.
Yeah, that's interesting. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like those all sound like great activities. So I guess my next question is, what are you seeing from the students that makes you think right now what I'm doing isn't engaging them?
Myself, and then I have a student teacher in here. So I thought if there's 2 teachers, we can, double team them. We always have to be standing next to the team to actually be engaged and start doing something. My envision is that we can send them and they can start right away without us needing to be like, okay, what's the next step? Okay, like leading questions. And there's not enough of us to still be at 6 different boards at one time. So I would love for them to be able to start on their own and be, I know it sounds weird, but excited to do the problem.
It sounds weird, but it's not, because it's exactly what, that's kind of like what we're aiming for, I've got a question, kind of going outside of this class. Like I have a vision in my head, maybe a bit of an assumption here that, these students have come in, it's called a math lab class. In reality, it's like they're in this class because they've struggled in the past with math. My guess would be is that they know that they have struggled with math, right? And, so they have probably like told themselves a story, or maybe their grades have told themselves a story, or maybe even the actions of, parents or teachers or whoever, or maybe even other peers may have sort of told them this story that they're like not so great at math. So that's a big hurdle right there, just right out of the gate. Like no matter what we do, there's this image in their mind potentially of what they are either capable of or not capable of in a math classroom. I'm wondering, so they go to this math lab class, and then at some point in the day, they also go to Algebra 1. My wonder is, what does Algebra 1 look like if you were to paint a picture? Because, you're kind of like, I'm going to this math class, and I see that, my teacher or teachers are really like trying to engage me and get me in and all these things. And maybe there's even some success. Like, it's like, wow, that was like a great lesson. I learned something. And then I go down the hall later, maybe after lunch, and then I go into the Algebra 1 class. What is that math class, or what message does that math class send them?
Yeah, they are building. They are definitely building. It's typically here's the notes, let's do some practice problems, and then here's your homework. So with, I'm trying to spread this same, like, experience it. Let's have the kids grapple with it. It's pretty interesting. I've had a couple of the kids, we were up at the whiteboards, we were doing, I forget which activity that you had, the plant growing one.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Right?
Planting flowers revisited.
Doing the equations, right? 2-step equations. Yep. So they were doing amazing double number lines. They were making a table, like everything that I was like, wow, you guys were right. Like, it is so cool. They did come up with that on their own. And then we sit down and they start doing delta math, and they're like, oh, we have to do algebra now. And it's like, you were doing algebra at the whiteboards. You just didn't make that connection.
Totally.
So what I feel like you're saying is that their Algebra 1 class is that traditional, here's the notes, the teacher's telling me what to think, and then I'm going to mimic the same type of thing that we need to figure out what they're doing in this class does carry over into the other class.
Right. Like, it's almost like thinking about what's the bridge? What's the bridge that takes what we did in the planting flowers, and how do we connect that to what they're doing in the other class, where they're going to get their grade and it's the thing that they have to pass, and they're more worried about that, maybe knowing they're in this class. And so, like, what is that bridge so the student can say, today actually is going to help me in both classes. I was feeling successful here, but I realize now that strategy, that model that I use to solve that problem, I can use to solve this problem over here. Like, what do you see right now as that bridge?
I honestly, I don't know. I maybe more of the hands-on type of activities, creating more of the story problems, not just the word problems from the book, but how can we use that planting flowers type of strategy in the Algebra 1 class, so they're not just solving 2x + 5 = 3, over and over and over again.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I have two, like, sort of wonders / thoughts that I'm thinking about here. Like, and there's like one, like, I'm like, in a perfect world, I'm envisioning, like, imagine you did that planting flowers revisited unit. For those who have never used it, it's basically like doesn't notice and wonder. It shows this, this sunflower, starts at, I think it's like 4 centimeters tall. And then, a week goes by and then it grows a little and then it grows a little more and it grows a little more. So it's this linear relationship being developed. And students obviously out the gate may or may not realize that. They generate an equation, they solve it. We try to promote using the tools like a double number line or a table or a graph. And in my mind, I'm like wondering, it's like, imagine a world where if you knew what was going to be coming up topic wise in Algebra 1, like let's say out in a perfect world, your class would be the morning and then Algebra 1 would be maybe the afternoon. And you're like, I know today they're going to introduce 2-step equations. So you give them the thing that maybe isn't happening in the Algebra 1 class. And it's almost like by the end of your class, we consolidate it, they share their strategies, but then you take that intentional 10, maybe 20 minutes to go, this is exactly what this looks like algebraically in case they missed it, right? John and I just recorded an episode about the oblivious viewer loop, where it's like someone watches a show and it's like, they missed it. Someone missed the point. And like, the person next to them is like, how'd you miss that? It was right there. It's like, we make it super explicit. And we're like, and later today, you're going to be looking at a couple equations like this. And maybe you give a couple of the equations, you go, what would be that? Like, pretend that equation is this flower. What would it look like? Mm-hmm. Right. And it's almost like you're kind of like setting them up to kind of go, okay, they got this experience. And now it's like later today, that teacher may just come out and say, here's what a linear equation is. It's, y equals mx plus b. And there's a number, the coefficient here and like, whatever we do. And I did it. I totally get, that might be how it's being presented. But imagine if they had that sort of under their belt and like consolidated so that when they walk into that class, they're going like, that's the flower. And in their mind, they can see how it's growing, or they can maybe make a new context to kind of get that maybe head start on that concept. What are your thoughts? Like when I share that, is that even like a potential possibility? Is that like way too like from the movies or like in my dreams, that sort of thing happening?
So they are quite a few grade levels behind in their math. So originally we were going to just do puzzles. We're going to do like patterns and like notice and wonder, like all the things that they're missing. We did a lot on the multiplication of 2-digit numbers using an area model, because my envision was to use that into factoring second semester because they're terrible at factoring polynomials. So we tried to keep up with the Algebra 1 class, but they're so far behind that we couldn't do it effectively. So after the 2-digit numbers multiplication, we went into linear relationships. So I think what you said is amazing. That would be ideal, but we can't keep up, what we spend a whole 2 weeks on. Algebra 1's already off the race, and gone.
Right. Do you now, going back to what Kyle's recommendation was in the sense of trying to kind of give them a leg up before they go in there. But if we still take some nuggets from his recommendation there about at the end. So I think this is the situation that I've used to find myself in, and this is related to the oblivious viewer effect that we were mentioned in that last podcast. Actually, I think it's coming. It hasn't been released yet, Kyle. Is that I was teaching my lessons when I started switching to teach more activity-based, like you described. I used probably every single activity that you just, listed off there. And I thought, and I did have a lot more engagement in my classes. I had kids liking math a little bit more, but I think what happened was, and I was teaching, say, these problem-based lessons, and I was having students, enjoy math class, but at the end of math class came, and when I had to give them we call them the naked problems, the problems that are just X and Y's, or they had a hard time, right? They had a hard time. And that ended up being what the standardized test was, and they went to grade 10. That's what they saw in grade 10 and felt like they weren't being successful there. And it wasn't until Kyle and I had chatted about this that we realized that we had to kind of tie that bow on. Like, we had to kind of say, we do need to build this bridge between these great activities that bring out models and strategies, and then show kids how to use those models and strategies on the naked problems. So it's kind of like we did our flipped classroom idea, where instead of front loading, we taught through the problem-based lesson to bring out the ideas, the strategies, the models. They developed them, we consolidated, and then it was like, okay, now we're going to solve this problem. And I did a little bit more teaching at that point, but taught using the strategies we saw from the kids or that was brought out already. So it was kind of like, we took and tied what they did, and we made sure that those strategies and models came out, but it was like they felt ownership in those. And then we tied it to go, oh, you know what, on this 2-step problem that looks like this, we're going to use that same strategy here. We'll draw the same model here. And we kind of connected the dots. And so kids then, once we started doing that, and then making it very clear at the end, like, our learning goal today was to solve these 2-step equations. And we did that by doing this, by doing this, and by doing this. And we want to continue to do that. And that can be helpful to solve these problems. And so and a lot of times we would make an anchor chart together based off that, so that we said, hey, look, this is the strategies and models we used to solve this, this skill. Insert skill here, whatever that skill is. And but I guess the big story here is that we kind of, for a long time, we thought engagement would get them. And then, like what Kyle said, it's like we thought by kind of putting them in this situation that kids would pick up what we're putting down. But it wasn't until we purposely said, this was our learning goal. These are the expectations. These are the look fors. These are the success criteria we're looking for. Did all of a sudden we had some better success moving forward.
I think that's exactly what I'm missing, is I'm not tying it together. What you said about the bow, it's like, we're not tying the bow on yet. We're still just doing all these different activities. And kids are even saying, we're not doing anything that we're doing in our algebra class. And I'm like, oh,
but we are.
Right. And that's the perfect opportunity to say, like, yes, you like,
yeah, but there's more. Wait
5 more minutes.
Yeah. Wait, there's more.
This is, let me show you, let's go through why this is the case after you've kind of brought these, these ideas full round.
And honestly, today I was in a class, I was in a grade 8 class, and I was doing some algebra on a number line. And at the end, it was like everyone had the answer. And it's like, in your mind, your brain's telling you, like, what's the point in restating it? But it was like, at the end of the day, it's like, I want to gather them around. So I gathered them around a board. And it's almost like, you give them ask them a question about it, turn and talk. It almost lets you sort of get your script together in your mind of exactly what you want to say. And it's almost like you just have to say, I just need 8 minutes of your time, and it's going to be well worth it. It's like, these are the important 8 minutes that I need your attention for. And I want to make sure you jot that down, because, later today or this week or, whenever it's coming up, or last unit, if that's the case for the algebra one, this is what we did today, and this is why we did it. And helping with that, being that explicit, can be really helpful. And then I want to also flip back just as a thought, because you had mentioned something that got me, which I know, I'm picturing myself being in this place where you had mentioned about how students were they had missed a lot well before Algebra 1. So there's the other option, you go back there. But again, it's almost like, if it's so far back that it's not going to help them in that Algebra 1, then you almost have to it's like you have to make a choice. And maybe it's a choice for this group, and maybe the choice is different for the next group. But it's like, where do you want to go? Because if you're maybe you're making gains here, but if it's so far off from that Algebra 1, and then next year, I guess the question you have to ask yourself is what's the true purpose of that class? Yeah. And my gut is telling me that maybe for you, the purpose is you want kids to realize that they can be they can think mathematically, that, they have a lot more to offer than maybe they thought in a math class, all of those amazing things. But I'm guessing that the reason it's actually in their schedule is as a means to help them get through the Algebra 1.
Correct.
So it's hard because it's like almost like there's competing priorities here. And the word priority is actually only supposed to be a singular word. It's actually not supposed to ever be plural. Like priority means primary, one, the thing. And it's almost like trying to figure out like, what would that be? And I guess in my mind, if it is to try to support them in that Algebra 1 to ensure they can get through that Algebra 1 and get that credit, the reality is this class probably should exist in grade 1 and it should exist in grade 2 and grade 3 all the way through so that we catch students way earlier than Algebra 1. But, not a perfect world. So here it's like, if I can create that bridge, like John had mentioned, it's like that bridge from where you can get them to engage in the problem and they can access it. And then I just sort of like that bow tying at the end is almost like, how can I let them see that these things are the same? And that now you almost have, it's almost like you have like the secret sauce. Like you talked about the spicy, medium, and mild. It's like you have the secret sauce to help those students get to the more algebraic or abstract representation in that Algebra 1 class. So I don't know where's your head at there? Like, does that seem like something that might be attainable or something that you can work towards and might help those students a little bit in that Algebra 1?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is supposed to be a helper for them to pass Algebra 1. When I started this in the summer, I'm like, okay, what are the most important concepts that they have to know and be good at? So I'm not going back to 5th grade math,
Right.
Yes, they need to know their multiplication facts, but I don't want to just drill them over and over. Like I said, the area models for the 2-digit multiplication was not supposedly to go back to whenever they learn that in whatever grade, but so we can look forward to the factoring later on to be like,
Right.
hey, we did this with algebra tiles, we did this with the area model.
And they get kind of both of those things, right? Because like they get to practice that multiplication with that model, even though now you're moving on to more, algebra, with variables involved and so forth.
Right. So I think my big question also is like, what curriculum should we be, covering during this? Because it's so open-ended. We are almost like every week, oh, what's today? We plan on Fridays and okay, what should we do next week? And we adjust it as we go. But it would be nice to have one set of like, these are, and it's hard for every school, every kid is different.
Yeah. My gut is telling me, like from the curriculum standpoint, it's like if you were to take that Algebra 1 and you looked at here's what the Algebra 1 is, and if you could go, what is just below there? Like what is just before it? And like what's the low floor, high ceiling thing I can do there? And if they can enter that gets them to that point, like that bridge to the next thing. So it's not that they have to know the Algebra 1 stuff when they leave your class, but it's like, imagine, if I am going to be doing factoring, for example, so you're factoring trinomials, I might start with that 2-digit, like in that class, and I might just try to bump them towards, throwing like, hey, it's a 10 squared instead of an x squared. And it's, there's a 3 10s instead of a 3x. And, so you could sort of like just get them to get to the place just before. And it's like, if they can enter into just before, then at least it's almost like they might be able to do that little step up in that Algebra 1 class to see that, oh my gosh, what I did in that class is actually helping me in this class, instead of them maybe thinking it's like, whoa, it's so disconnected in their mind that, they don't see it as actually supporting.
Right.
Yeah. And I was going to add, I would if I was going to design that course too, I would do exactly what Kyle said, but I would focus everything on strategies that scale. So models that scale, strategies that scale, like what strategy, like you used the area model there, like, which is perfect, right? Like you want to use the area model for multiplying 2-digit by 2-digit or multiple digits because it will scale into the algebra, like you realized. But when you're adding, multiplying, dividing, like when you're multiplying fractions, the area model is also great for that same thing. So we could build in multiplying of fractions to re-enhance that same model can scale. Like we can use the same model here. When you're adding fractions, we'll focus on, fluency strategies about how numbers work, and thinking about decomposing, components, and then realigning them and adding in different ways, because that can be helpful with collecting like terms. And when we go to add expressions instead of multiplying expressions, I would think about trying to find great strategies that are supportive for that particular skill, but more than one skill. So for example, like this book right here, Figuring Out Fluency, from Jennifer Bay Williams, is a great resource for that, because they show the different strategies using number lines, different ways to think about number that scale up the ladder. And then there's actually, this is a K-8 book, but they have, Kyle and I actually, we were reviewers for the middle school book. I think it's just specifically order of operations, fractions, and proportions, and solving equations. So it goes like basically into algebra 1, some of those skills, and the book focuses on what fluency strategies. If I was designing that, I would spend a ton of time kind of doing the games and the strategies from there.
Okay.
I love it.
Awesome.
So I'm wondering, it sounds like you've got a few things to think about, maybe some, potential next steps there. How are you feeling right now? Like, how do you feel thinking forward? I know that you're heading into a bit of a break with Thanksgiving coming up here. Where's your head at? Let us know, how's that pebble feeling, bigger or smaller at this point?
I want to say thank you, because I think just talking it out and knowing what the amount of work we've put in this semester has definitely shown that we're on the right track. Being more intentional about wrapping up the lesson that we're doing, and really specifically saying this was our learning target today. And, maybe even asking them, like, when have you seen this in your algebra class? Maybe we could have them bring it out and have it in kids speak. It's so much better for the kids to hear than always the teacher talking to them.
Right. That's great. That's great. Saying like, hey, we used this area model. Where do you see that might fit in this place? Or we used a number line here. Where do you see that might fit in? Or we used a halving strategy and a doubling strategy. How might that fit in? So those are definitely some really great takeaways. I think it's going to be awesome for you moving forward. What do you say on kind of revisiting this, coming back and say, I don't know, maybe before the summer, and kind of revisiting, or right after the summer, and talking about see how things changed.
Yeah, I would love that.
I love it.
Awesome. All kids engaged, right?
That's awesome. That's awesome. And you know what? I mean, that's why we love doing these episodes. I think, anytime we have an opportunity as humans just to talk it out with somebody else, get a varying perspective, it gives you just something new to think about. So, it sounds like your head is in the right place, which I think is most important. So you have the best in mind for those students. And it sounds like you're doing a lot of really great things. And let's be honest, you're in a tough spot. Like they're getting additional support, probably 8 or 9 or 10 years too late. This is probably something that would have been really helpful, like I said, like really early on, to try to catch those students before things get too far behind. And now you're in a position where you're trying to do a lot of things. You're trying to help them with a lot of things from the past. You're trying to keep them doing the things now. And, you just have to also just remember to give yourself grace, and that, it is a tough challenge. So trying to have that balance between the two, I think, is really key. And it sounds like they've got the right person in the position for it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Me and my student teacher, we talk all the time, like after they leave the class, and we're like, okay, we can't change in the 3 months that we've had them so far, right? It's been a lot of bad habits in their past. So we just have to take one day at a time.
Absolutely.
One day at a time. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Awesome stuff. Thanks so much, Laura, for joining us. And as I said, we'll look forward to our next chat.
Absolutely. Get some rest.
A great one. Enjoy the turkey.
Thanks. Bye.
Take care. As always, both John and I learned so much from these math mentoring moment conversations. And actually, just after Laura and we hit the stop button. She had just mentioned it's just great to be able to have a conversation, like let the ideas flow and really just chat them out with somebody else. So how are you going to engage in some of that reflection? Like Laura got to reflect and gain some different perspectives through this conversation with John and I here. How about you? Like, are you going to reach out to a colleague or a friend or a partner? Or maybe you want to go out to social media, leave a comment on our Facebook group, or leave a comment on the YouTube channel for us to kind of get a sense of what's happening. Maybe we'll get a conversation started over there. Whatever you choose to do, make sure you do something so that you take what you've learned here and, you sort of like cement it a little bit, like by writing it down and making an action plan for yourself.
Yeah, awesome stuff. Would love to hear what you've done there to kind of solidify those ideas. Also, if you have not yet done this and you've not yet subscribed to the podcast, you should do that immediately. And then, if you could, we would kindly ask, hit the review button. Leave us a review on that platform that you're on right now. Tell us all the ways that you've enjoyed the podcast if you've listened to more than once. And now, if this is your first time, we would just love for you to subscribe. Welcome. And then keep listening. But if you've listened a few and you've gotten some value, leave us a review. That helps the show. It helps other math educators who are in turn then helping students. So do us a favor, do your students a favor, do the world's students a favor. Leave a review. Thanks.
Awesome. And friends, this was a Math Mentoring Moment episode. And we don't just randomly like pick people here. We need to hear from you. So head to makemathmoments.com/mentor. That's makemathmoments.com/mentor. And we have a very short form, just like your name, your email, and essentially like a couple sentences to describe what is the current pebble in your shoe. What's that thing that is keeping you up at night about math class or school in general? We'd love to have you on for a conversation, just like we had here with Laura.
In order to ensure you don't miss out on new episodes as we publish them every Monday morning, be sure to subscribe. I already asked you to do that, but you can head on over to YouTube as you can head on over to YouTube as well. And subscribe over there because this episode is also over there on video format in YouTube.
I love it. All right, my friends, show notes are always up on the makemathmoments.com website. This time it's episode 211. Holy smokes, that's episode 211. So makemathmoments.com/episode 211. Well, until next time, I am Kyle Pierce.
And I'm John Orr.
High fives for us.
And a high five for you. You almost thought I forgot to say it, didn't you?